So about a week ago, I was doing a post-maintenance pre-flight when I noticed that the fuel tank sump valve under my right wing was leaking. I knew it was leaking because it was covered in a thick film of blue dye, and there was a puddle of blue dye under the wing left over from the evaporating fuel. So it was time to replace the sump valve. Now, replacing the sump valve normally involves draining the fuel from that tank. You can do the replacement without draining your tanks if you have quick hands and you don't mind a little lead poisoning, but sensible people will drain the tank. Sensible people will also drain the tank on the ground, but I couldn't resist taking the opportunity to collect some operational data in the process. Draining the tank in the air, while unnecessarily risky and not something that anyone should ever do, allows me to do three things. 1. Get valuable glide data that I can program into the G3X and ForeFlight for a more accurate glide ring, as well as update my RV's POH, which is currently just a lot of copy-paste from other builders' RV manuals. 2. Determine the actual amount of unusable fuel in the tank by measuring what's left over after I remove the sump valve. 3. Perform an operational test of Smart Glide, which should automatically activate upon engine failure. On the con side of this idea, though, it's risky, it's dumb, no sensible pilot would ever do it, and if it ever appeared in an NTSB report, everyone would agree that I'm an idiot. I prepared for today by flying home from Arizona, mostly on the right tank, running it down until it only had about 2 gallons left. The left tank still has 10 gallons, which is plenty of gas to get there and back with enough left over for any foreseeable contingency. Fuel is not the risk, redundancy is. If something were wrong with the left fuel tank, I'd have no backup. I kept this in mind as I prepared for today's mission. The plan's going to be as follows. Depart from San Francisco Bay Area Metropolitan Oakland International Airport, which you just saw, and then set up shop 6,500 feet above Tracy Airport. Make a note of the wind direction and speed. Switch to the right tank and fly circles until it's dry. Once the engine quits, push the prop all the way in, turn to a direct crosswind heading, and set up the autopilot for best glide speed, 75 knots. Glide for as long as possible at both low and high prop settings, beginning the recovery steps no lower than 3,000 feet. I've got SD cards in both the G3X and the GTN recording all the data I'm going to need, and whatever fuel is left after the engine quits will be my unusable amount. Once overhead Tracy at 6,500 feet, I switched to the right tank and set up the autopilot for gentle turns. The fuel sender counted down the gallons from 2 to 1 to 0, and surprisingly, the engine continued to run for another 11 minutes after the quantity reached 0. Another good learning point. When the fuel was finally depleted, the engine quit and surged to life again with a whoomph a few times before finally stopping for good. The deceleration was immediately noticeable. I did exactly as planned, turning to the crosswind direction, pushing the propeller up to high RPM, and setting the autopilot for a 75-knot glide. Unfortunately, in what was the world's best example of poor timing, only moments after the engine quit, NorCal told me to maintain at or above 6,000 for passing traffic. I was so busy with handling the engine failure that I missed the call, and NorCal later gave me a traffic alert and chided me for not paying attention. I did make visual contact with the traffic, and I was able to confirm that it was no factor, but still not great. NorCal then told me that I had additional traffic and should remain above 4,500 feet, which cut my glide test much shorter than I would have liked. I also noticed that Smart Glide had not automatically activated like I expected. I guess I need to review the installation manual for the G3X and figure out why. When it came time to recover, all I did was switch back to the left tank. After a brief moment, the engine sprang back to life and I was on my way. With the test complete and ATC mad at me, all that was left to do was return home to Oakland. This flight taught me a few different things. First, it taught me how long my engine will continue to run even when the fuel quantity shows 0. Second, It taught me that the totalizer is less accurate than the senders, and even the senders aren't really that accurate. Hopefully recalibrating them as I refuel the right wing will help. Third, it taught me that even above Tracy is probably still too busy in airspace to be doing shenanigans like these. Maybe next time I'll try New Jew. The flight also viscerally reinforced something that we all already know, that an engine merely needs fuel, air, and ignition to run, and if you take away any of those three, all you do is give it back and your engine starts running again. Calculating the new glide ratio was easy using the data from FlyStow. I noted the top and bottom altitudes of the glide, and then I used the plan view to find the distance between the start and end points. Remember that I had turned the airplane directly into the crosswind, which shortened my glide distance a bit. I needed to find a corrected no-wind glide distance, called the true air distance, so I compared my ground track and magnetic heading to determine my wind correction angle. From there, it's some simple math to adjust the actual glide distance up to the true air distance. I put the plane back on runway 28 right with a relatively smooth 2-bounce wheel landing, then taxied home. Ground made me make a side-by-side pass of oncoming traffic on taxiway Delta, which is the first time that I can remember ever receiving an instruction like that. Once back at the hangar, I shut down the engine and declared mission success. Next steps will be to drain and measure what's left in the tank, replace the fuel sump valve, and recalibrate the sender while re-adding fuel in 2-gallon increments. I can now also update my aircraft's POH with some more accurate experimental data. Thanks for watching. Don't do what I did.